I almost didn't go into that store. It was supposed to be a quick stop, 5 minutes, maybe less. A cake, nothing fancy, just something sweet to bring along, so I wouldn't arrive at my daughter-in-law's parents' house empty-handed, like a burden instead of a guest. At my age, you start thinking about things like that. My son pulled into the parking lot and said, "I'll wait in the car, Mom. You go ahead." That should have been the first sign, but I smiled, grabbed my purse, and walked inside, breathing in that familiar supermarket smell: baked bread, detergent, cold air humming from the freezers. Ordinary, comforting, safe. I chose a simple chocolate cake, the kind my son loved as a boy. No frosting roses, no writing, just chocolate. I remember thinking, funny how you still try to please them, even when they're grown. At the register, the cashier was a young woman with tired eyes. She rang me up quickly, barely looking at me, until suddenly she froze. Her hand brushed mine as she handed back my change. Then she gripped it. Not hard, but urgent. She leaned forward just enough that her voice disappeared beneath the scanner's beep and the low music playing overhead. "Ma'am," she whispered, "don't react. But you should be careful around the man you came with." My heart stuttered. "I'm sorry," I asked softly. Her eyes flicked toward the front windows, toward my son's car. "I don't have much time," she murmured. "I've seen him here before, more than once, and not for groceries." A chill ran through me that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. "That's my son," I said, almost laughing. "You must be mistaken." She shook her head slightly. "I wish I were." The receipt printed. She tore it off with shaking fingers and pressed it into my palm. "If you go out the front," she whispered, "he'll see you. Use the back door. Just watch him for a minute." I stood there, frozen, the cake suddenly heavy in my arms. Watch him? I wanted to scold her. Tell her she was wrong. Tell her she didn't know my boy, the way he used to sleep with his stuffed bear tucked under his chin, the way he cried when our dog died, the way he promised me he'd always take care of family. But something in her eyes stopped me. Fear, not gossip, not drama, fear. I nodded once. She released my hand as if nothing had happened and called out, "Next." My legs felt unsteady as I walked toward the back of the store. The metal door creaked softly when I pushed it open, and suddenly I was outside, in the alley behind the supermarket. The sounds of traffic, muffled and distant. I set the cake down on a crate and peered around the corner. I could see the parking lot. I could see my son's car. And then I saw him, not waiting, not bored, but doing something that made my breath catch in my throat. 5 minutes, she had said. I didn't even need one, because in that moment, watching my own child from the shadows, I realized something terrible. You can love someone your whole life and still never truly know who they are. My first instinct was to look away. There are moments in life when your heart tries to protect you by pretending nothing is happening. I could feel that instinct clawing its way up my chest, begging me to step back inside, grab my cake, and let this strange warning dissolve into embarrassment. But my feet wouldn't move. From behind the corner of the building, I watched my son lean against his car and check his phone, not casually, not like someone killing time, but with the tight focus of a man waiting for a signal. He glanced around once, twice, then popped the trunk and reached inside. He didn't pull out groceries. He pulled out a small paper bag, folded, careful. My mouth went dry. This is ridiculous, I told myself. You're imagining things. I had raised this boy. I knew the way he laughed when he was nervous, the way his left eyebrow twitched when he lied. I searched his face now for something familiar, anything that would tell me this was all a misunderstanding. Then a man approached him. They didn't greet each other like strangers. No awkwardness, no introductions, just a nod, efficient, quiet. The man handed my son something. My son slipped the paper bag into his coat pocket and passed over cash. No wallet, no counting, like he'd done it many times before. My knees went weak. I pressed my hand against the cold brick wall to steady myself. 1,000 explanations raced through my mind. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was work. Maybe it was something innocent that just looked wrong from a distance. But deep down, something old and wise inside me whispered, "You don't hide innocent things." The man walked away without looking back. My son closed the trunk and exhaled, rubbing his face like someone relieved a task was over. Then he smiled to himself and got back into the driver's seat. I felt like I'd swallowed ice. The sound of the back door creaking made my heart leap. The cashier stepped out, pretending to smoke. She didn't look at me directly, but she spoke anyway. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "I didn't want to scare you." I turned to her, my voice barely holding together. "What is it?" She took a breath. "He meets people here. Always the same pattern. Always out back. Sometimes angry, sometimes shaking." I closed my eyes. "And you thought I should know," I whispered. She nodded. "Because last time he mentioned his mother. That felt like a knife sliding gently but deeply into my chest." "What did he say?" I asked. Her voice dropped. "That you'd be heartbroken if you ever found out." For a moment, the world tilted. The alley, the sky, my certainty about the man I'd spent my life defending. The car engine started. I straightened quickly, panic flaring. "He'll wonder where I am." The cashier stubbed out her cigarette. "Take your time," she said. "Truth doesn't like being rushed." I picked up the cake with trembling hands and walked back inside, forcing my face into something neutral, something normal. When I stepped out the front doors, my son looked up immediately. "There you are," he said, smiling too easily. "Everything okay?" I nodded. "Just fine." But as I slid into the passenger seat, one thought echoed louder than any fear. If this is what he does when he thinks no one is watching, The drive to my daughter-in-law's parents' house felt longer than it should have. My son hummed along to the radio, tapping the steering wheel like nothing in the world had changed, like he hadn't just done something in a parking lot that had turned my stomach inside out, like I hadn't seen him exchange that bag with the ease of habit. "You're quiet," he said, glancing at me. "You feeling okay?" "I'm fine," I replied, staring out the window. "Just thinking." He nodded, satisfied with that. He'd always been good at accepting the answers that asked the least of him. As we pulled into the driveway, the house came into view, big, bright, welcoming. Laughter spilled out through the open windows. This was supposed to be a happy visit, a family gathering, one of those afternoons people take pictures of and post online, smiling like nothing ever goes wrong. I carried the cake inside and handed it over with a practiced smile. Compliments followed, hugs. Someone poured me tea. All the while, I watched my son. The way he avoided the kitchen when his wife was there. The way he kept checking his phone, thumb hovering over the screen, then slipping it back into his pocket. The way his jaw tightened when conversation turned to money or work. Little things. The kind of things I'd ignored for years. After lunch, I excused myself to use the restroom. Instead of heading upstairs, I slipped into the hallway near the study, where coats were hung and shoes piled neatly by the wall. That's when I heard his voice, low, urgent. "I told you not to call me here," he hissed. I froze, my hand resting on the doorframe. "I don't care," came a voice from the other end of the phone. Female, sharp. "You said you'd handle it." My chest tightened. "Not now," my son said. "My mother's here." There it was again, me, always the thing that complicated his life. "I don't have more cash," he continued, pacing. "I already gave you what I had." A pause. Then his voice dropped even lower. "No, she doesn't know." I felt my knees weaken. "She can't find out," he added quickly. "You promised." I stepped back before he could see me, my heart hammering so loudly I was sure the whole house could hear it. I retreated to the bathroom, locked the door, and pressed my palms against the sink. The mirror reflected an older woman with wide, frightened eyes, someone who had raised a child, loved him fiercely, and suddenly realized she might not recognize him at all. "This isn't your fault," I told myself. "Whatever this is, it isn't because you failed." But the doubt crept in anyway. It always does. When I returned to the living room, my son was laughing with his in-laws, relaxed and charming, the phone nowhere in sight. If I hadn't heard his voice myself, I might have convinced myself I'd imagined it all. Later, as the afternoon sun dipped low, my daughter-in-law pulled me aside. "Mom," she said gently, "are you sure you're okay? You seem distracted." I smiled at her, a small, tired smile. "I'm just learning something new," I said. She frowned slightly. "About what?" I looked across the room at my son, my boy, standing by the window, his reflection doubled in the glass. About how much there still is to learn, I replied. And as we drove away that evening, one truth settled heavy and undeniable in my chest. Whatever secret my son was carrying, it was already unraveling, and I was closer to the center of it than he realized. That night, sleep refused to come, no matter how tightly I closed my eyes. I lay in the guest room staring at the ceiling fan as it turned in slow, lazy circles, stirring memories I had spent years keeping still. Every time I started to drift, my son's voice echoed back into my head. She can't find out. The urgency in it, the fear. By morning, I knew one thing for certain. Pretending I hadn't seen or heard anything would only make me complicit. At breakfast, the house buzzed with ordinary sounds, clinking cups, toast popping up, the low hum of polite conversation. My son sat beside his wife, smiling, passing jam like nothing weighed on him at all. I studied his hands. They trembled slightly when he reached for his coffee. After the meal, he announced he needed to run a quick errand before we left town. His wife barely looked up from her phone. I felt a chill slide down my spine. "I'll come with you," I said casually. He paused, just for half a second. "Oh, there's no need, Mom. It's boring stuff. I could use the fresh air," I replied, already standing. "And I hate sitting alone." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. The drive was quiet, too quiet. He kept glancing at the rearview mirror, adjusting it even though nothing was wrong. When we stopped at a small strip mall on the edge of town, he told me to wait in the car. "I won't be long. I'll just stretch my legs," I said, opening the door before he could argue. He hesitated again, then shrugged. "Suit yourself." I followed him at a distance, careful not to be seen. He walked with purpose now, turning down a side street that led behind the shops. My heart pounded, but my feet kept moving. He stopped near a parked sedan I didn't recognize. The woman from the phone call stepped out. She was younger than I expected. Sharp eyes, nervous hands. They spoke in low voices, too low to hear clearly, but their body language told the story better than words ever could. Accusations, defensiveness, desperation. Then she held something out, an envelope. My son didn't take it right away. He shook his head. She leaned closer, said something that made his shoulders slump. Finally, reluctantly, he accepted it. I felt a strange mix of emotions, anger, sorrow, disbelief, but above all, a quiet resolve. This was no misunderstanding. This was a pattern. I stepped back before they could notice me and returned to the car, my hands cold despite the warm sun. When he came back, he looked pale, eyes darting as if expecting someone to be watching. "You okay?" I asked gently. "Yeah," he said too quickly. "Just tired." We drove off, the envelope tucked out of sight. He talked about traffic, about work, about nothing at all. I listened, and I remembered something my own mother once told me, long before I became a wife or a parent. When someone lies, they spend more energy protecting the lie than living their life. That night, as I packed my bag, I made a decision that frightened me, but also steadied me. I wouldn't confront him yet. I wouldn't accuse or plead. I would wait, because whatever my son was tangled up in, the truth was already pressing against the surface. And when it finally, I left their house the next morning with a hug that lingered longer than usual. My son held me tight, like he always did, but this time there was something different in his grip, an urgency, almost desperation, as if he sensed that something had shifted between us, even if he couldn't name it. "Call me when you get home," he said. "Okay." "I always do," I replied softly. On the bus ride back, I watched the town slip away through the window and tried to sort through the tangle of thoughts in my chest. Part of me wanted to believe there was an explanation, something innocent I was misunderstanding. Another part, the quieter but wiser one, knew better. I didn't confront him because I wasn't ready to hear the lie he would give me. At home, the silence felt heavier than usual. I unpacked slowly, folding clothes that smelled faintly of someone else's laundry detergent, setting the cake box, now empty, into the trash. I brewed myself a cup of tea and sat at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around the warm mug, staring at nothing. Then the phone rang. It was my daughter-in-law. "Mom," she said, her voice tight, "has my husband been acting strange around you?" My heart skipped. "Why do you ask?" She hesitated. "He's been distant, secretive. I found a receipt in his jacket pocket from a place I don't recognize. When I asked him about it, he snapped at me." I closed my eyes, so she felt it too. "I don't want to cause trouble," she continued quickly. I don't know what to think anymore." I chose my words carefully. "Sometimes," I said, "when people feel trapped, they make choices that don't look like them. That doesn't mean we ignore those choices." She was quiet for a long moment. "Do you know something?" she asked. I inhaled slowly. "I know enough to say you're not imagining things." Her breath caught. "That's what I was afraid of." After we hung up, I sat there for a long time, the tea long gone cold. The truth was no longer mine alone to carry, and that made it heavier, but also clearer. That evening, I did something I hadn't done in years. I opened an old box tucked deep in my closet. Inside were papers, letters, documents I'd kept just in case. My late husband used to tease me for it, said I planned for disasters that never came. But life has a way of proving cautious women right. Among the papers was a name I hadn't seen in decades. The same name the cashier had whispered. My hands shook as I traced the letters with my finger. It wasn't a coincidence. The envelope, the secrecy, the fear in my son's voice. This wasn't just a mistake, it was a chain, stretching back further than I wanted to admit. I folded the papers neatly and placed them back in the box. For the first time since the supermarket, I didn't feel confused. I felt prepared. That night, I didn't cry. I sat by the window and watched the streetlights flicker on, one by one, and accepted a hard truth. The next time I saw my son, I wouldn't be coming as just his mother. I would be coming as someone who finally understood the whole story. I didn't sleep much that night, but when morning came, I felt strangely steady. Clarity does that to a person. Once you stop guessing, once the fog lifts even a little, fear loses its grip. I made myself breakfast, watered the plants by the window, and moved through the morning like a woman preparing for a long walk, slow, deliberate, grounded. Around noon, my son called. "Mom," he said, trying to sound casual, "I was thinking of stopping by this weekend, just to check on you." My heart tightened at the word check. "That would be nice," I said. "Come for dinner." There was a pause. "Dinner?" "Yes," I replied. "Like we used to, just you and me." Another pause. Longer this time. "Okay," he said finally. "Saturday." After we hung up, I sat down and took the old box out again. I spread the papers across the table, smoothing them carefully, as if they were fragile photographs. Each page carried a piece of a story I had tried to forget, a business deal gone wrong, a man who disappeared, a woman who changed her name and vanished into another state, a woman my son should never have crossed paths with, yet somehow he had. Saturday came faster than I expected. When he arrived, he brought flowers and a forced smile. He hugged me, looking around my little house as if searching for something out of place. "You look tired," I said gently. He laughed nervously. "Work's been rough." We ate in near silence. He complimented the food, asked polite questions, avoided my eyes. Halfway through dessert, I stood and began clearing the plates. "Sit," I said. "I'll get the tea." When I returned, I placed 2 cups on the table and the envelope. His face drained of color. "Where did you get that?" he whispered. "I saw you," I said quietly. "Behind the shops. I heard the phone call at the store, and I know who she is." He pushed his chair back abruptly. "You don't understand." "Then help me understand," I said. "Because right now, it looks like you're tangled in something that could ruin your life and your marriage." His hands shook as he ran them through his hair. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this." That sentence told me everything. "She came to me," he said, voice cracking. "She said she knew about Dad's old dealings, about the money. She said if I didn't cooperate, she'd tell everyone. My wife, the police, you. So you paid her," I said. He nodded. "At first. Then it wasn't enough." I reached into the drawer and placed the papers in front of him. "She didn't just know about your father," I said. "She was part of it, and she's been playing this game for a long time." He stared at the documents, his mouth slightly open. "You knew?" he asked. "All this time, I knew enough to protect us," I said softly, "but I never thought you'd be pulled into it." He broke then, covered his face, cried like the little boy who once scraped his knee and ran to me for comfort. I let him cry, because sometimes, before a truth, I thought that once the truth was out, the worst would be over. I was wrong. The days after that dinner felt like walking across thin ice. My son called often, too often. He asked what he should do, what he could do, how to make it all disappear. Fear had made him small, and guilt kept him awake at night. You can't outrun this, I told him gently. You have to face it. But if I do, he said, voice tight, I could lose everything. I closed my eyes. You're already losing it. You just haven't felt the fall yet. Meanwhile, my daughter-in-law grew quieter. She didn't accuse. She didn't shout. That silence worried me more than anger ever could. I recognized it, the sound of a woman rearranging her heart to survive. One evening, she called me again. She's been contacting him nonstop, she said. I saw the messages. He doesn't know I know. My stomach twisted. What kind of messages? Threats wrapped in smiles, she replied. Promises of silence if he keeps paying. Hints about how easily accidents happen. That was the moment I stopped hoping the situation would resolve on its own. Listen to me, I said firmly. You and I are going to handle this together. She hesitated. How? We stop being afraid. The next morning, I drove to the town where the woman lived. I hadn't been there in over 30 years. The streets were narrower than I remembered, the buildings older, but the weight in my chest felt exactly the same. I parked across from a small office with a faded sign. Her name was printed there, bold as if she had nothing to hide. I walked in. She recognized me instantly. Well, she said with a thin smile, I was wondering when you'd show up. I'm not here to bargain, I said. I'm here to end this. She laughed softly. You don't have that power anymore. I slid the folder onto her desk. Copies, dates, names, proof she didn't realize I still had. Her smile vanished. You walk away, I continued. From my son, from his family, from everything connected to us. Or I take this to the authorities and to the people you're really afraid of. She stared at the papers, her fingers trembling despite herself. You wouldn't, she whispered. I leaned closer. I already raised one child who underestimated me. I won't make that mistake again. For the first time, she looked unsure. I stood to leave. You have 48 hours. When I got back to my car, my hands finally began to shake. Courage doesn't mean fear disappears. It means you act before it can stop you. That night, my son called. She stopped, he said. No messages, no calls. I looked out the window at the dark sky. It isn't over yet, I told him, but now it's finally moving in the right direction. Relief has a strange way of arriving quietly. There was no dramatic confrontation after that. No police cars, no shouting neighbors, no doors slammed in the night. Just silence, the kind that settles after a long storm, when the air still smells of rain, but the wind has finally gone. 2 days passed, then 3. The woman disappeared from my son's life as if she had never existed at all. Her office went dark. The sign was gone. Even her phone number stopped working. My son wanted to celebrate. "It's over, Mom," he said, laughter trembling at the edges. "You did it." But I didn't feel victorious, because endings like this don't bring joy, they bring understanding. I asked him to come over again, this time with his wife. They arrived together, stiff and uncertain, sitting at opposite ends of the couch like strangers sharing a waiting room. I poured tea and let the silence do its work. Finally, my daughter-in-law spoke. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" My son lowered his head. "I thought I could protect you." She let out a tired breath. By lying to me, I watched them carefully, not as a judge, but as a mother who had made similar mistakes once. Love can turn into fear so easily, and fear into terrible decisions. "You don't fix broken trust with explanations," I said softly. "You fix it with truth and time." He reached for her hand. She didn't pull away, but she didn't hold on either. "I'm going to tell you everything," he said. "No more secrets." That was the bravest thing I'd heard him say in weeks. After they left, I sat alone and thought about the years I'd spent protecting my son from the shadows of his father's past. I thought about all the things I'd hidden, believing silence was kindness. I realized then that I had taught him that habit. The next morning, I did something I should have done long ago. I made copies of every remaining document and handed them to a lawyer I trusted, one who specialized in closing doors properly, not just quietly. "No more ghosts," I told him. "If something ever surfaces again, I want it handled in the light." He nodded. "That's wise." Weeks passed. Slowly, my son's laughter returned, not forced, not brittle. His marriage didn't magically heal, but it stopped bleeding. That in itself felt like a miracle. One afternoon, my daughter-in-law came by alone. She brought flowers and an awkward smile. "Thank you," she said, "for not giving up on him or on me." I squeezed her hand. Families don't survive by pretending nothing's wrong. They survive by facing it together. As she left, I felt something loosen in my chest. The story wasn't finished yet, but for the first time, I wasn't afraid of how it might end. I used to believe that protecting your child meant standing in front of them, blocking the world, absorbing every blow so they wouldn't have to. Age teaches you otherwise. Protection isn't about shielding. It's about teaching someone how to stand when you're no longer there. Months passed. Life settled into a quieter rhythm. My son stopped calling in panic and started calling with purpose. He found new work, humble work, honest work, and for the first time in years, he slept through the night. His marriage didn't return to what it once was, but it grew into something truer, less polished, more real. One evening, he came by alone. "I need to tell you something," he said, sitting across from me at the kitchen table. I turned in the last of the documents. Everything, even the ones that could have stayed buried. I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw a man, not a frightened boy, running from shadows. That couldn't have been easy, I said. No, he replied, but I couldn't keep living half a life. We sat in silence for a moment. Then he smiled soft, grateful. You know, he said, when that cashier stopped you, when you started watching me, I thought you were going to ruin everything. I reached across the table and covered his hand with mine. I didn't ruin your life, I said gently. I saved it from becoming something you couldn't escape. Tears filled his eyes, and this time he didn't hide them. After he left, I sat by the window as dusk settled in, the same window where I had once waited, worried, afraid of what I might discover. The world outside hadn't changed, but I had. Truth doesn't arrive loudly. It slips in quietly, asks you to look, and waits to see if you're brave enough to keep your eyes open. I learned that love doesn't mean silence. It means honesty, even when your voice shakes. It means choosing the hard path when the easy one would destroy the people you care about most. If you're listening to this and something in your heart feels unsettled, don't ignore it. Pay attention. Watch. Ask. Speak. Because sometimes the moment you decide to face the truth is the moment your family. Thank you for being here and listening. If this story touched you, please tap the like button. It helps more than you know. Subscribe if you'd like to hear more stories like this. And if you feel comfortable, leave a comment telling me where you're listening from or sharing a small part of your own story.